Alrighty then. I am excited to welcome. Um, you may be the first person that has one first name that has two names in it. Terrlyn,
Mm.
to our Leaders Who Care series, and I'm not sure you're the first reverend or pastor we've had on because I think we've had on before. But welcome to the Leader Who Cares series.
Well, thank you, thank you, thank you.
I think people are going to be delighted to see, not that we have to prove it, because you already have that you are a leader who cares. So let's show them type of deal right here. And if you can start, best way to start is if you can share a little bit about who is Terrlyn, not about what you do and this and that and the other, but where you're from originally, where you are now, anything you want to share about family, um,
Mm.
something you've never told anybody that you want to reveal to the
Well,
world.
I'm not going to reveal it to the world right here
Why
now.
not? I mean, at some point you have to say it. This could be as good a time as any.
It could be, right? Because our secrets are really what like impact us in a very negative way sometimes, right? But I
Yeah.
don't have any secrets and I don't have anything that I want to reveal right now. But I do want to share with you who I am because it really impacts the work that I do. So I am the 10th child of my parents.
Wow.
And I was born and raised in Mississippi. And interestingly, I was raised about 45 minutes outside of Memphis, Tennessee, where Martin Luther King was assassinated. For your viewers who know anything about Ida B. Wells, she was from the town where I went to high school at, and where we went uptown to get our groceries because I jokingly say we lived in the suburbs, but it was rural areas, so there's no suburbs. Um, and so she was born there, and I say that because it um gives you an indication of how I got into the work that I do, because I also grew up in a town which was a predominantly African American community. There were white people who lived in the town, but if you know anything about the South, you'll have these pockets of where African Americans live, and then maybe there's some whites interspersed, or maybe the whites live in a place and there's some black people interspersed. So very, very rural. And it was a place where two things. One, where it it wasn't the stereotypical Mississippi that people talk about. The first thing people say, "Oh my God, it was so racist there." Well, it wasn't any more racist than it is in any other part of the world. The difference is in Mississippi, we knew where we stood with folks.
Mm.
And at the same time, in my neck of the woods, we had a particular type of relationship with white people. You know, you pass them on the street, you're saying hello, how are your people doing, and all of those things, but you weren't going to go to one another's house for dinner. Um,
Do they really say, how are your people doing?
oh yeah, like I would have people, I would be uptown, and I'm gonna keep putting uptown in quotes because we would go to town to go grocery shopping and things
Sure.
like that. And so I would have people, like maybe older white people who didn't know my name personally, but they would look at me and say, "Oh, aren't you so and so's daughter?" Because they could tell, by who you favored.
Right.
And also was the type of thing where you literally could go into a store and say, well, my mom says put such and such on credit, and she'll pay you when she comes uptown or whatever, right? That's the kind of working sort of relationships that we had. And so I have an affinity for my small town. But what was also really critical is that in this African American community that I grew up in, we were always just encouraged to, do our best, and just whatever it is that we wished and desired, to go for it. So we weren't, stymied by the limitations of the world and racism that existed. It was just a really, really loving and encouraging community. So I owe everything I am to that small community and to my parents.
Well, it's great to hear because God knows there's a lot of others that aren't like that, and everybody has value. Every single person has value out there, and we need to take advantage of it in a positive way. Take advantage of it. So you were, what number were you in the 10?
I'm the baby, big
Wow.
baby, and I proclaim it loudly and proudly
So are
because
there,
once you're the baby, you're always the baby. But
yeah, well,
yes,
that's one good part. Don't put baby in the corner, right? Remember that. Um,
exactly,
and
exactly.
so, but also sometimes there's the least pictures taken, and if you drop in number 7, 8, or 9, or 10, well, they drop. Just pick them up. Versus if you're the first kid that they take really good care of.
Right, right. Well, it's interesting because I will say that I probably was very spoiled, but not spoiled rotten. I am not a spoiled rotten person, but I knew that I was loved immensely. And quite honestly, I don't know what it feels like not to be loved because of the way my family treated me. But to be honest, when you are the youngest, you have different parents than your older siblings
Mm,
had. And so
true.
they would say things to me like, I don't know how mom let you get away with that. We never got away with that. But I mean, come on, when you're down to number 10, you learned a lot, didn't
Yeah,
you?
yeah. You can hide a little too, and you don't get noticed about this and that. And I get it. So when you were a kid and then a teenager, were you the organizer? Were you the entrepreneur or community projects gal, or did you just read and play? What did you do?
Oh my goodness. So here's the thing I think that would set me apart from my other siblings is I ask a million and one questions. I mean, I was so curious about everything. And if you came to my house to sit down, I would ask you questions, right? And I can remember my brother always saying, Can you stop asking all of those questions? Don't ask adults those questions. So it's none of your business. And I would say, Well, if they're going to answer me, then I might as well ask them. And my parents, though, never told me to stop asking questions. And I really value that and admire that about them. And I also ask a lot of questions about the Bible. So even though I grew up in a family that was very committed to their faith, I grew up with parents who were open to whatever questions I asked. There were people in the community I asked questions of, and no one ever told me, oh, go sit over in the corner and be quiet. So I was definitely very curious about things. And then I also was the type of person I would give you the benefit of the doubt, no matter what. And I was always helping people, which is why I ended up being a psychologist. And then, God had a sense of humor, so I ended up becoming a pastor. As
He does that.
yeah.
Well, you know what, that good segue there. So clearly psychology was on your mind consciously at times and maybe not at times, but you were doing it. You got your bachelor's at Howard, you
Mhm.
got your master's at American, and then you just didn't have enough apparently, so you went for your PhD, in clinical and school psychology.
Mhm.
Um,
Yes.
so were you envisioning all of this, or what were you thinking about?
So it's interesting because when I went to college, who knows what you want to major in?
Yeah.
And I initially thought it would be journalism, but before I got to college, I knew I would change to psychology because I would always help my friends out and they would say that, you're such a good listener, always have good feedback. And so when I got to college, I quickly learned that if you really wanted to practice psychology, you needed a PhD. So that's why I went to American, took the steps that I needed to take, which is really important. I think that this is something that I don't often share on a podcast. It was very difficult to get into a PhD program because most PhD programs only accept about 6 people, 6 to 7 or 8 people each year. And
Yeah.
they get hundreds and hundreds of um, applications. So I did a master's at American University so I could strengthen my chances of getting into a PhD program. And so that's why I took that route. And then once I did my PhD, I just happened to get accepted to a program that did both clinical psychology and school psychology, which stood me in good stead later on because it allowed me to work in the school system. And then it also allowed me to have a private practice later on. So, very grateful to Hofstra University for their clinical and school psych program.
Well, you actually had experience in a classroom of 10, basically, um,
Absolutely.
of how to be a psychological strategy or something
Mm,
during that. And I'll bet after having 10 kids, like you said, not you having 10 kids, you're part of 10 kids,
yeah.
a small families almost maybe seem strange or something, or not enough. You need
Well,
more.
I just laugh when people say, "Oh, I come from a big family. There are five of us," and I'm like,
Right, exactly.
"Yeah." But I only had two, so that was enough for me.
Yeah. Well, you know what they say in sports, if you have two, you can play man-to-man coverage, but if you have more than that, you had to play a zone coverage.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the
yeah.
way it goes. Well, we found at our firm actually on the fact that leaders and whatever their organizations are can always do better when they're doing good at the same time.
Mm,
It took a while for I think the world to get that. Actually, it seemed like you either had to be in a nonprofit making no money to make a difference, and in a company just making money, and that's all you cared about. Whereas it's really
mm,
important to have both. Can you share with us how you evolved towards working with children and youth,
mm,
directly and then indirectly, also, if you want to call that through administrators and teachers?
mm. So I'll share a couple things for me is that I was always very passionate about adolescence and youth. And I grew up in a family where we actually had to take care of one another. So when
Hmm.
I was younger, my mother would have me to go stay with elderly folks to take care of them. So I grew up with this sense of we're all responsible for one another, right? And then I also knew that I wanted to work with Black and Brown youth, particularly those in inner city.
Hmm.
Though I didn't grow up in it. I just knew that there was a need to work with those youth because they were underrepresented. So I began after getting my PhD working in a juvenile delinquent facility. Then I moved to a psychiatric hospital, and then I moved to a school system. So keeping that steady flow of just working with adolescents, and some of them had never seen a woman of color with a PhD.
Good point.
So it was really, really important for me to represent my culture, to represent these young kids, to help them know that they could do and be anything that they wanted to do. I didn't grow up with a lot of money,
Yeah.
but I grew up with this deep desire and people who helped me to get to where I am. And I wanted to be one of those people for them. So for the longest time, my work really just stemmed with working with teenagers. And then um, two things happened. One, I realized that in order to help teenagers, you often have to help the parents and mothers in particular. And so I started doing a lot of work in my private practice with mothers. But I also worked with teachers because I traveled the world working with, I used to work with a gentleman by the name of Glenn Singleton, and he did a lot of work on courageous conversations about race. So he
Hmm.
had a protocol called Beyond Diversity. So when I was called to go to divinity school, because like I said, God has a sense of humor, as if I wasn't already doing enough. uh, when I got called to go to divinity school, I could no longer work in the school system because you needed to be there full time. So, and Yale was the type of school that, no, you need to be here during the day. So, I had to make a choice. And I started working with him, traveling the country doing work on dismantling racism by teaching teachers and educators how do you have courageous conversations about race. And I did that work with him for the longest. And I'd like to think that I had an impact on the teachers and administrators that I worked with in that vein. And then later on, after I got out of school, I also, while I was pastoring and having my private practice, I did some adjunct teaching. So then I was able to work with college level students, and I would teach them um, ways in which to engage with other cultures and to understand other cultures. You don't have to like them. You can act, in fact, have a resistance towards them. But what is it that you need to do to be able to engage with folks and work with folks? So I loved that aspect because those were predominantly white students. And often some of their resistances were towards Black people because they never had interacted with Black people before. I mean, at the particular school I was at, most of the kids came from money. So the pool was really, really small of their diversity. And that was just really important to me to do this work. And it was something that I had done for years, even on the side. I would always go out and do trainings around dismantling racism. So,
Did
yeah.
did did you ever find that or wonder why isn't there, you talk about you were curious and you asked questions and whatnot, why isn't it a natural thing or why aren't people craving to learn more? A white person learning more of a black person, learning more of an Indian person, learning more of this person, that person, and the different food that they eat and the different experiences they have and the different differences they have, that how cool that is
Mm.
versus not.
Well, it's really interesting. And that's also a loaded question because I think on some level, if we talk about white people, right, from my experience, this is only from my observations and experience and the work that I do with white people on dismantling racism, there is a curiosity. But sometimes that curiosity is more of, let me go to another country or let me go to the islands and find out how really cool it is to engage with people who are different. And then the funny thing is, when people go to other countries and other islands, they also want to just stay in American hotels and still like this is the way it should be done. And so there's a curiosity, but it's not curious enough. And then my experience with white people here in the US is that the curiosity stops because everybody should conform to what the standard is. And the standard is white America, right? And so if I'm different, why would you want to act like me if you think what I'm doing is deviant? Or if the media tells you that there's nothing valuable about a person of color, right? And so I think that that gets in the way. But I do want to also say that I've met plenty of white people who are curious. You
Hmm.
know, I have really, really good friends who are white who feel safe and comfortable enough to ask me questions, right? And sometimes when I'm teaching white people on dismantling racism, I teach in a way that's very loving, but also push people. And so I'll say, you can ask me any question you want to ask me. And they do. And then I'll say, now, that's a crazy question, right? But we can laugh about it because there's no judgment. And so I think that people really are curious on a certain level, but our country hasn't done a very good job of teaching us how to navigate those differences. So people of color, we interact with one another very well because we have a lot of similarities and we'll just ask questions, or we'll just get involved in one another's culture. So I think that there is a bit of curiosity, but perhaps there needs to be more.
Well, if you think about it, I'm not the expert on diversity, but I grew up in Montreal, which is very diverse, and we were taught that you don't even have to talk about diversity; you just love it. Basically, it's a great thing. And I'm Jewish, so I don't have horns, and I don't think you taste like chocolate and stuff like that. And so, but I'd be curious, I guess. But it blows my mind why people wouldn't be really interested I mean, Italians speak to Italians in a certain way. Jewish people,
Yeah.
mothers speak a certain way. Everybody speaks a certain way. Thank goodness that we don't all speak the same way. It would be boring.
Absolutely right. I mean, it's so interesting because when I was at Hofstra, and when I was at American, there was a large population of Jewish people, and I would go to Seder's and I would do all of that, and it was just so fun. I'm like, how do people not want to know this,
Yeah.
right? So, and Mark, they say we're cousins anyway, right? Like actually, it was a Jewish man who said that. He said, we're cousins, right? Said, well,
Well, I tell you, there's Persian Jews, there's Ethiopian Jews, there's all that, and we're first cousins, okay, all the way.
absolutely, absolutely.
So
So,
I want to ask you about the meaning of like in a plane they tell you to put the oxygen mask on yourself because you got to be able to help. your kids or whoever after. But talk to me a little bit of the value and especially what you call the sacred, selfish, and shared relationships. That really caught my attention.
Yes. So everything that I do in life is based on this concept of sacred, selfish, and shared relationships. And I will tell you where I got it from long before I became a pastor. There's a scripture that says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself." And the problem is, I think most people don't love themselves even when they say they love God or whoever God is to them.
Right.
And so for me, the sacred, selfish, and shared is about developing that deep relationship with the sacred, whatever that is to you. It could be those trees out there, right? But develop this relationship and let it be a solid foundation and let it allow you to determine what are my values? What are the things that I really hold dear for humanity? How do I see this shared humanity? And then tap into that sacred source, whatever that is. Have a practice that you utilize that pulls you back to the sacredness of who you are. Because I believe that we are all divinely created and loved unconditionally. And
Mhm.
that's just it. If we start from that deep, deep place of knowing and love and knowing that we are just this is just a body, this is just a like a vessel,
Vessel,
right?
right?
But I am much more than this, right? So if we could start from that sacred place, it guides our actions in the workforce. It guides our actions in the community. It guides our actions in our families with how we treat one another. So let's start from what is that foundation, right? And then secondly, then do the inner work that we need to do. That's what selfish is. Selfish doesn't mean that we take from everybody else, but it's like, what is the thing that we need to change about ourselves that will make us better beings in this world? And so that's the selfish relationship. And then the shared is, how do I now take this out into the world? How do I work with Mark and with everybody else, whether they're different or not? In fact, we are all different from one another, even if we show up in the same
Mhm.
skin or race. But how do I take the essence of who I am and work in such a way that it will help the world to be a better place? So I have this concept called sacred intelligence, and it's about going inward to tap into that sacred part of you so that you can make intelligent choices that will not only manifest your greatness, but will manifest the greatness of others. So it's not about, me, but it's about the whole.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite songs ever was Michael Jackson, "Man in the Mirror."
Yeah.
It's kind of what you're talking about.
Yes.
It's brilliant. He was brilliant. Put aside whatever all the people think and whatnot. But even a song like that, I don't even think it got enough attention as to what, and I don't even know what he was thinking, obviously. But what I got was kind of what you're saying. Look at the man in the mirror and feel it and be it and whatever, all that. It was brilliant. So yeah, I like that a lot. I once received um, post, a video, whatever it was, and on in the middle they had God, Allah, prophets, energy, Mishka Bibble, all these names in the middle. On the right, they had people arguing about what to call it in the middle. On the
Mm.
left, they had people changing their name to Mahatma Gandhi or Mahatma
Yeah.
Rainbow or something. And the whole purpose of it was it doesn't matter what you call it, just be it and do it.
Exactly, exactly. And so that's really, even as a pastor, that's the model that I come from. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're a Christian pastor," and say that. But I actually believe that all religions have value,
Yeah.
right? And when you get right down to it, it's all about love. And ultimately, whatever you call that sacred thing, it's love. And that's really how I see it. It's like this big ball of energy is nothing but pure love. And if we can tap into that, man, we could do great work in the world. And it's really important for those of us who are leaders who care to just remember to keep tapping in that place of love, because sometimes the world is very ugly and it can be hard leading during a time like this. But if we just keep reminding ourselves, let's go back to that place of love, which is sacred, and then how can I find that love and be able to extend it in the world?
Love is all you need. Isn't that what the Beatles said? Love is all you need. And Einstein wrote a letter to his daughter. I think she read it when after he had passed away one, and he said, "I did this and I did that, and I studied this, I studied that, and this, and the one thing I wish I would have put out more, studied more, whatever words he used, was the thing that had more abundance than anything else in the world, and that was love."
Yes. Yes,
Amazing.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, so yeah, it's so important. So I wanted to ask you about. I'm involved with a group called Tower Capital, two brilliant women that started this fund and nonprofit, et cetera, that funds um, companies doing great things about generational health.
Hmm.
You've talked about intergenerational trauma in the Black community and how it shows up. And I don't think, I think I'd love to hear more about that because I don't think people, not a blanket that no one real recognizes, but I don't think people pay enough attention to how it is intergenerational, how generational health is a critical element. I saw, and we'll just give one quick example. I saw an interview on a documentary with a young African American woman, 20 or something, and they were talking about food. It was about food and eating healthy and whatnot. And she said, "Well, everybody in my family got diabetes. I'm going to get it anyway, so it doesn't really matter."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a complicated question.
Of course, I'm going to actually
Uh,
ask you
and,
easy
and, and,
questions.
and so it's like maybe we need a part two, but here's the thing when I think about intergenerational trauma, and I will say it from a mental health perspective. So when I do work in Black communities and I have forums on things like depression, anxiety, stress, I talk to individuals about understanding that just because we have endured things year after year after year after year, whether that be personal, whether it be collectively as a group, just because we're walking through life and we're handling it, we should not make the mistake that that is normal, right? Now, we are not the only group. I understand that. But one of the things, the best example I can give you, and I don't know how your viewers will take this, particularly those who are Black, but one of the examples that Black women pride themselves on is saying, I am a strong Black woman. Yes, I agree that we are a strong, strong group of people because we, as Black women, have endured a lot. And quite frankly, we've carried a lot of the weight of the world on our shoulders. But we ought not think that we can't get help for that because we have been sent that message from the time that we were nursing someone else's babies, from the time we've had babies and then had to go back out in the field and work 3 hours after, where our humanity wasn't seen, where our pain wasn't seen, and we were taught to grin and bear it. It is intergenerational trauma when we continue that message. So that's the best example that I can give you of intergenerational trauma. And then we also know as it relates to trauma, it takes about, I think, 8 to 12 generations for trauma to even get out of your system. So if you think about what happened, let's just take what happened during enslavement. That hasn't been that long ago, Mark. So
No.
we're not yet out of that trauma. So our bodies also respond to that. I'm going to react differently when I'm pulled over by the police than you are, based on what I know happens to my people. That's intergenerational trauma. When we see people like George Floyd or Michael Brown be murdered and our bodies respond, that's intergenerational trauma. So it's a big question, but it's about teaching people that just because you've endured it, just because your family has diabetes, just because your family has high blood pressure, it doesn't mean that you have to have it. So, for instance, part of the reason why we have high blood pressure is because of stress.
Right.
And we know that Black people have about 25 to 50% more stress than whites. The research has shown it. That's why mothers who are middle class mothers who have babies. Infant mortality rate is higher than it is in poor white women, right? So we know that we carry this stuff in our bodies. So it's a matter of educating people. It's a matter of educating Black people. And it's also a matter of educating healthcare providers. It's a matter of educating corporations who we know that the food that is the best food for us to eat is not in poor communities. So
Uh,
it's a systemic problem. Intergenerational trauma is really a systemic problem. So I am trying to answer it very
no,
quickly, but it's a
that
big issue.
that was great. And one thing we say in LA is we leave them wanting more so we can do a sequel. Um,
Yes.
so we would, and the one thing I'll just add to that is trauma. Even in one person does stay in our bodies, it doesn't go away. It body remembers it and the brain remembers it and act and tells us what to do according to that. So it's
Mhm.
very easy to see why if it stays in our bodies, it'll continue in generations. And it takes commitment to keep getting better and better and better. So we will definitely have to have a sequel on that because it's a super interesting topic. So I do have one more question though for this part because we're going to leave them wanting more. Uh, is a client told me in 2021, a client told me about, the year of the pandemic, 2020 was the year that flew by slowly. And when he told him that, I said, wow, that's pretty good actually, because it did feel like that. And it felt like Mother Nature was smacking us in the head and saying, can you get your act together? I'm giving you some time to think about it. Can you get your act together? And now we're already, it feels like it was yesterday and years ago, all at the same time. And now we're in the last half of 2025, amazingly. With all that, what are you most grateful for and what are you most hopeful for?
Oh man, I honestly, I'm most grateful for my ancestors and the people who came before all of us because they've shown us that we have it really in our DNA how to get through all of this hard stuff. And what we're going through now in this country, people have been through it before. So we don't have to go crazy about it. We can be concerned about it, but we don't have to go crazy about it. So I really, when I think about being grateful, I am very grateful for the people who've come before to show me the way. And this will leave them wanting more too, because at the end of 2020, my church had a horrible thing to happen. It was burned down as a result of a hate crime. So we are just in the process of prayerfully moving back into this church really soon because it was a long process of rebuilding it. But here's what I'm grateful for: the people who showed up to support us, white, Black, Latin, Asian, it does not matter because the people who want to do good, they recognize that hate is not the way to go. And so I am grateful because I think that despite what the world wants us to know or want us to believe about hating one another, I think that there are more of us who love one another than hate one another. So that's what I'm most grateful for. And I think in 2020, we showed up in that way as well.
And it sounds that's what you're most hopeful for too.
I am indeed.
Do you remember Fleetwood Mac?
I do. Don't stop thinking about tomorrow.
Yeah, and also thunder only happens when it's raining.
Yes,
Players only love you when they're playing.
right. I hope I got that right. Did I get that right? Don't stop thinking about tomorrow. Was that Fleetwood Mac?
I think so.
Sure. Okay.
But
If
I'm not
not,
sure. We'll have to check it out.
somebody will tell us. But yes, I love that song too.
Yeah, and
Uh,
it's true. When you talk about the church and the people coming, thunder only happens when it's raining. They're the thunder that's coming.
yes.
Boom,
Yeah.
and players only love you when they're playing, and they're when you're playing, you love it. You want to be in the game. So
Yeah.
thank you for being a leader who cares. Um, I'm grateful that I have a new friend
Yeah.
actually,
Yes. I
and
do.
I'm hopeful for the same reason that you are a leader who cares. So until the sequel, thanks for being on the Leaders Who Care series.
Thank you for having me, Mark.